How do you do? Mr. Lucas feels it would be a little unkind to present this picture to you without just a friendly warning. We are about to unfold the story of Savini, a man of magic who sought to create art after his own imagination without reckoning upon the nightmares he would give to generations. It is one of the strangest stories ever told. It deals with the many mysteries of existence: life, death, love, loss, sorrow, and happiness. I think it will thrill you. It may shock you. It might even horrify you. So if any of you feel that you would prefer not to place your nerves under such a strain, now's your chance to, well, we warned you.
He's not your brother anymore.
That's a matter of opinion, and I don't give a fuck about yours.
Okay. What'd you do out there, man? Put on to me like you wanted me to smash him.
He was exaggerating, using colorful speech, Sheriff. He bit my finger clean off.
You, sir, are a perfect patsy. Let me shake your hand. To finish your brother's work.
Anytime you work with Tom Savini, you better have your A game because he brings it all the time. I'm a humongous fan of his. I met him last night for the first time. It was great. And sometimes when you meet guys that you grew up with, you see them and they look extremely old. And Tom looks like the same as he always has looked. That's pretty incredible.
His relationship with George Romero and George's desire to shock the audience was accented by Tom's work.
Tom basically made it possible for me to make some of those films.
Tom's like a living legend. Tom makes things that we can only possibly imagine come to life.
The guy's doing the effects and he's acting. He's a terrific actor. I always admired people who did more than one job.
You can't say horror movies without thinking about Savini.
Everything I've done started because of one movie and how I was influenced by my father, my 4 brothers and sister, and I did it all while living here in Pittsburgh. When I was growing up, my dad could do anything. He was a carpenter, a plumber, an electrician, a bricklayer, and a shoemaker, and many, many more things, all while working full-time at the steel mill. I imagine he was so good at so many things because, being an immigrant, he had to be good at many things to survive. So I grew up thinking that you're supposed to do many things well. Before I was born, my mother had 5 children, 4 brothers and my sister. There's 13 years between me and my sister, and she's the youngest of that group. So I had four fathers, 4 big influences on my life. Henry was the oldest one, and he was the smart guy. He had books and books and books all over the place. Music, art. He was a painter. He was a tattoo artist and a sculptor. He was studying to be a mortician. So as a kid, I would see him sculpting a big Egyptian head. I think he was practicing restorative makeup. So he was a big artistic influence and an intellectual influence. The next brother was Sullivan. He influenced me as far as physical fitness goes. He was a big muscular guy. He was in the Korean War. Then there was Joe. Joe was a terrific dancer. When he danced, the floor would clear and everybody would watch him. He also had a great sense of humor. He'd put wigs on and false teeth just to make us laugh. After him was Tony. He's the only brother that stuck around. He's the brother that still lived in the house with me growing up. I remember sitting and watching Hal Holbrook doing Mark Twain. I mean, I was interested in Mark Twain because Dick Smith had done Hal Holbrook's makeup. So he was a big influence as far as, sitting around and, watching Mark Twain with me. He was the guy that was into me being into makeup. My sister was still there. My sister had the burden of raising me. She was in charge of me from morning till night, when she put me in the crib or in bed at night. So my poor sister, had no life because she was raising me. My dad was 50 when I was born, so when I'm 10 years old and running around the house, he's a 60-year-old guy. When I was a kid, Sunday paper was important because of the comics, you had these great big color comics. I used to watch my sister sit there with a sketchbook and colored pencils and the comics, the Sunday comics. And by the end of the day, she had copied, just by looking at them, in colored pencil, the Sunday comics. And you couldn't tell the difference between the Sunday comics and what she was doing. It was brilliant. So that gave me an appreciation of being able to sit there with a blank page and create something. Tony was 28 when he died. I was 12 or 13. We're talking about 1959. He died in the alleyway next door from a bullet wound. Tony was going with a bunch of friends target shooting and bought a rifle and had it sitting on the saw downstairs, and my mother would hang clothes on the wire. And what we can put together is he was reaching for clothes and bumped it, and it shot him in the side. And he came up here and combed his hair in front of my mother, who was watching TV, to show her he was okay, that nothing was wrong, And he was going to go next door to tell them to take him to the hospital, but he passed out in their yard and bled internally for about an hour before they found him, Can't really recall how devastating it was back then. I just don't have a memory of it. A lot of bad things that happened in my life, I can't remember, specifically. It's almost like living in denial. It's like I don't acknowledge it because of any pain that might be involved in it, I think that's part of my MO. mother was a huge influence on me. I mean, I adored her. You know, she's been gone for 40 years now, and it's like, you know, every now and then it'll come back to me of how important she was in my life. And she was the one that let me stay up all night to watch horror movies after my dad would make me go to bed. And my mother would let me sneak back down and watch horror movies on the black and white TV when I was a kid, because she knew how much I loved horror movies. She was the one where I'd be up in my room and I'd make myself up as Zachary or some fuzzy kind of green werewolf and come down the stairs as quietly as I could and stand behind her while she's watching television and just wait for her to turn, because she could feel it, and then make her scream. I feel bad sometimes of how bad I used to scare her. But anytime I wanted to go to the movies, I always had enough money, and my mother would take me. I remember my mother taking me to see Rodan and Godzilla movies at the Plaza Theater up the street. This is where I spent my childhood. This was the Plaza Movie Theater. I saw The Creature from the Black Lagoon when it opened here in 1954. Now it's a corporate coffee house. It was a travesty when this place closed. It was a movie theater up till 5 years ago. It opened in 1917. I was a kid going here in the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. You know, even in the 90s, you know, Dusk Till Dawn played here, you know, when it opened. But now it's gone. Another house of magic is gone. Watching television as a kid, Father Knows Best, you know, all these sitcoms, I always wondered, well, why is my life not like that? Thinking back on it, you know, we were poor. We had nothing. Thank God the movies were only 25 cents, because movies were, you know, my escape into other worlds and other families, other genres. You know, I loved Westerns, but I mainly loved horror movies.
I saw a movie called Man of a Thousand Faces in this theater, the Plaza Theater, when I was 12 years old, and I flipped out.
Before seeing Man of a Thousand Faces, I thought the monsters were real. Frankenstein was real, the Wolfman, Creature from the Black Lagoon, they were real. That's why they scared me so much, you know, I was so afraid of them. But Man of a Thousand Faces showed me that somebody creates the monsters. In the case of Man of a Thousand Faces, it's Lon Chaney. But that movie was the catalyst, that was the springboard for me pursuing the career that I've chosen. You know, from that day on, I was reading about makeup.
In the late 1950s and the early 1960s, there was a renaissance of interest in classic horror, mostly due to two different events, one of which was the availability to different local television stations of a package of films called Shock Theater. And this happened to coincide with the launching of a magazine in 1958 called Famous Monsters of Filmland.
I was 12, and I would gather all the 9-year-olds. All my friends were like younger than me, the kids. I would gather them around to show them, and we would leaf through the pages of Famous Monsters. And it was really like watching Indiana Jones. It was spectacular. It was like a big thrill to see this magazine. And then, of course, I would try to make them up as one of the characters that we would see in the magazine. So that was great fun, except they would go home with cut throats and half their hair burned off. Not really, well, with makeup. And the parents were not thinking makeup and thinking, who did that? Savini, well, you can't play with him anymore.
So Tom, he was sort of a wild kid, you know, very rambunctious, always entertaining. He was an entertainer then, too. Back in the alley, he had a bunch of kids back here, and he's entertaining them, doing one thing or another, you know.
I was like the gang leader. I was like the, you know, the monster guy in the neighborhood. That's what it was like. And I shined shoes. I was the only white guy shining shoes in my neighborhood to buy a mask or makeup. I still collect masks from all over the world. So that's basically my childhood to the age of, like, I don't know, 14, when a magician came to town, Dr. Silkini. But the ads in the local paper said, live on stage, Frankenstein, Wolfman, Dracula. So naturally, of course, I went, you know. And Frankenstein was just a guy in a mask that came out after the magician did a few magic tricks. Wolfman was a guy in a mask. But Dracula was some kid, some little kid, my height, my age, that stood there, you know, with a cape on, and that was Dracula. And I noticed that they picked this kid from the audience, so I made sure I was in the audience next time. and made sure they picked me, because by that time I had fangs, I had a cape, had a makeup kit, I was Dracula in my neighborhood. So I made sure they picked me, and this is when I learned about misdirection, because I'm standing backstage with the cape over my face and made up with my fangs, and I'm watching the audience looking at the stage. So I sneaked out and got as close as I could to them. And when it was time for Dracula's entrance, I ran up to the front row and spread my cape. And you could see the kids move back in horror. I had scared them. It was the first time I scared an audience, And they saw it too, the people running the show. So they no longer picked a kid from the audience. I became part of their troupe. So that was my childhood. 14, that was my first job. They paid me in chocolate milkshakes and silver dollars to be Dracula in this traveling show. I was in grade school, and this kid, he put a cartoon on the bulletin board, and there was a guy tying a package. And it used to be, a thing that you did when you were tying a package, you would get somebody to put their finger on the knot. Well, this guy's nose was so big that he was using his nose to hold the knot, tying a knot, and we all understood what that meant. And he wrote Savini with a big arrow pointing to the guy with a big nose. And I didn't even know I had a big nose until then. But from that day on, I was self-conscious about my nose. And that affected everything. That affected my attitude toward everybody. I just felt inferior. That sort of thing prompts young kids to be better or to prove themselves, okay? So I had something to prove. I mean, part of making up for the inferiority complex, which was a constant drive to me, even in high school, I had to be doing as many things as possible. I was on the track team, I was on the wrestling team, I was on the team that put parties together. I wrote columns for the high school newspaper. But the greatest thing was the theater, being in the theater. When you're on stage in the theater and playing a part, you're not you anymore, to them or to yourself. You're the lead dancer in Guys and Dolls. You have a dancing solo with this gorgeous woman. I mean, that's what got me adulation from my peers in high school.
Before we made Night of the Living Dead, we were going to make a very sort of high-toned little romantic film set in medieval times called The Wine of the Fawn. So we went around to high schools to look at high school plays. And the young actor that we liked the best was Tom Savini, who was in a high school play at the time. So we talked about making this movie, and of course the movie never happened.
And the big deal at the time was Saturday night Chiller Theater. Bill Cardille, Chilly Billy Cardille, would host and interrupt in the commercial spaces, the horror movies.
I absolutely grew up watching Chilly Billy on Chiller Theater and his crazy cohort. It's so hokey now. I thought it was great then, but when you look back on it, they didn't have any effects, and it was him in a tuxedo in a dinky little television station up on the hill.
You looked forward to Saturday night and seeing those horror movies, on Chiller Theater. That's where you were. Every Saturday night, you were guaranteed to be home watching Chilly Billy Cardille on Chiller Theater. I would make up friends and get in the car and drive up to Channel 11 and knock on the big glass door with a monster on a chain. And they'd come out and they'd go, "Oh, shit, yes, come in here." And they would put me on with Bill Cardille.
There was this young kid. Turned out it was Tom Savini. And he was very quiet. He still is quiet.
Eventually, Bill Cardille would call me. He said, "I'm appearing at a drive-in, next week. You want to come and bring some monsters?" Which I did. Or there was a huge Halloween parade downtown. There still is. I would make up monsters and be on the float with Bill Cardille. Big banner that said, WIIC Channel 11. And I would do the Phantom of the Opera, Werewolf, and Frankenstein. And they would be on the parade with Bill Cardille. So he would be surrounded by monsters, and he was a famous guy to everybody back then, Chilly Billy Cardille. In my senior year in high school, The topic of conversation among everybody was, what are you doing? What college are you going to? Well, I wasn't going to college. I had no plans to go to college. My brother Joe was living in California, so I just told everybody, I'm going to Hollywood after high school and, be in the movies. Okay. So after high school, there's a knock on the door. It's my brother Joe. He had divorced his wife and he had come back to Pittsburgh, so that dream didn't happen. I went off to Penn State and became a dishwasher in a diner that he was a cook at. But then I met this girl, and she picked out the college for me, Point Park University, picked out my major, journalism. I did it for her, She was going off to Mercyhurst College, and I had to be going to college if I'm going to be with her. Of course, as soon as she left, she met a football player, and I got a Dear John phone call. I was in college. There was this girl sitting there, and she was like falling asleep at the table, and I was at a vending machine buying a cup of coffee or something. So I went over and I put the coffee in front of her. I said, here, you need this more than I do. And that began a relationship with Charlene, my first wife. We started dating. She got pregnant, and I enlisted in the Army to support us. That baby, her parents made her give up for adoption, who later on in life, 35 years later, I got a phone call from her searching for her parents. And when she found out it was me, it was amazing because she was a fan of mine. And here she is, my daughter, and she couldn't believe it, okay? Her name is Audrey. This blew my mind when she came back without the baby, because that's why I enlisted in the Army, to support us. I didn't have it as bad as the guys in the front line. Those guys would come into our base camp, and they were scary. There was something missing. The eyes are the window to the soul. They were soulless. These are the guys in the front lines. They were seeing and doing the really horrible shit. My job was just to photograph it when it was over, To exist in that environment, you have to turn off your emotions. And don't forget, I'm this little Italian kid, reading famous monsters, and now suddenly you're plummeted, you're plunged into this real life horrible situation of war, where people are, if they walked out of the woods, they want to kill you. Your emotions just don't turn right back on. You're forced to turn them off to psychologically save yourself in that sort of an environment, and that's what I did. I also felt a safety behind the camera, and I also felt looking at horrendous gore. I mean, guys blown apart with grenades and arms lying on the floor, head wounds, I remember looking at them like, how would I do that? These are special effects. When you're in Vietnam, after 6 months, you're entitled to R&R, rest and recuperation. I went to Hawaii to meet my then wife. But when I came back, they put me on the worst duty possible, 30 days of guard duty, which means there's the trees, and if they're coming, you're the first contact. So it's 4 guys, me and Morales, and 2 guys asleep above in a bunker made of sandbags with the roof. And you would take shifts, 2-hour shifts. And there were 7 of these bunkers. In front of every bunker, there was a tripwire in the front and on the sides. So if somebody bumped it, a flare would go off. If somebody cut it, they were spring-loaded, a flare would go off. Now, if you saw 1,000 Viet Cong running at you from the woods, you had to call the command bunker, and the officer in the bunker would come up with a night scope, and if he saw them, he would have to call battalion to get permission to fire. You were not allowed to open fire just randomly like that. So, 3 o'clock in the morning, the Chinook helicopters would go by, firing 600 rounds a second or a minute or something, and it was a wall of red because of how many tracer rounds it went by. And once that happened, you realize there can be nothing out there anymore, and you could relax. So at 3 o'clock in the morning, I'm on duty, and my trip flare goes off right in front of my bunker, and I immediately open fire with the M60 machine gun. Morales unslings his gun, and he's opening fire. The 2 guys above wake up, and they're setting up claymore mines. Trees are falling over. All the bunkers open fire in front of my bunker. And it was a duck, okay? Now you can see a caravan of Jeeps coming from battalion, and they're coming to me, because I opened fire without alerting the officer. Now a general gets out of the Jeep. I remember looking at the stars when I was calling, and I can't talk, I'm so nervous, you know. He calls me down. He says, "Why did you open fire?" I said, "My trip flares went off, sir." "Yeah, I guess I would have opened fire too. What was it?" I said, "It was a duck, sir." He said, "Did you get it?" I said, "No, sir, the duck flew away." We covered every square inch of dirt out there with something, shrapnel, a bullet, grenade, you know, but the duck got away. So he said, "All right, next time challenge it," which means, you know, "Halt, who's there?" You know, whang, whang. All right, so they took me off guard duty, and the rest of my time in Vietnam, I was called the Duck Slayer. But the next night, we were attacked. That line of bunkers was attacked. I wasn't there. Guys died, GIs died in those bunkers. My job was to go out the next day and photograph the Viet Cong bodies. But the duck saved my life as far as I'm concerned. And that's why I never eat duck. And the people were just beautiful, Vietnam. Men held hands. It wasn't a homosexual thing, it was a friend thing. The countryside was lush, like Ireland or something, you know. Just what are we doing here? Why are we just bombing and destroying, you know? I walked into a small village and there was a Pepsi-Cola bottling plant sitting there. And to me it was like, aha, that's why I'm here. It was business. When I came back from Vietnam, Lon was born. We got stationed in North Carolina. Coming back from Vietnam, you know, I was a zombie. There was no emotion alive in me. Well, I had to turn off the emotions. And it's something that you do for, you know, to survive mentally. A lot of guys couldn't do that. I mean, post-traumatic stress syndrome. Maybe I had that, I don't know. So Charlene and I divorced. And eventually she married a friend of mine. They left and took Lon with them to Florida. And, you know, back then it was a big deal because, you know, I visited Lon and hung out with him as much as I could.
As I got older and, you know, understood more about movies and horror movies, and my mom would tell me more about Tom, and, you know, I wanted to know more about him, and so she opened that door up for where I could communicate with him more, and then we just, you know, we got to know more about each other. Probably towards the middle of high school, then toward the end of high school, and obviously throughout my naval career, much closer to him, you know, calling him all the time, talking, emailing, once email became a thing, and like I said, going to visit him to the conventions around the country that he would also attend at. So our relationship is not a close father-son relationship, but we have stayed in touch. My marriage went in the toilet because I was an emotionless person coming back from Vietnam. And it was a movie. It was a movie that brought my emotions back. I went one night with my ex-wife to see Midnight Cowboy. And when Dustin Hoffman died in that, I went berserk. I was crying hysterically in the movie theater. Part of it was the character that Dustin Hoffman was playing and that he died, and it was a sad movie. But I think most of it was this was all pent up, you know, for a year or two, and this was the release. I finally released all the emotion I was holding back from Vietnam. I never thought about this until just this second. What a fateful move that was, you know. One night we walked into the local live theater, the Fayetteville Little Theater, and the play was going on, and that became my life.
What else do the children That once there was a fleeting whisper of glory called Camelot.
In fact, when I got out of the Army, a year and a half after we got there, I stayed 7 more years. There were 3 theaters. I was the makeup director for all 3 theaters. So a typical night, any night, almost every night, was me going and doing the makeup on everybody. You know, if it was Fiddler on the Roof, I was doing the beards on everybody and then playing a part, doing the acrobatics, you know, or changing and becoming a Jew with the payas and the hat and doing a dance, the bottle dance with the bottle on my head. a typical night, playing Charlie Brown, playing Thoreau, playing Ben Franklin after a 3-hour makeup job, So that was years of making myself up and everybody else, but I always made them up and myself for the mirror, not for the stage. You can get away with murder on the stage because of the distance the audience is from you and the lights, the effect on your skin. But I always made up my characters and every other character so it was realistic to the mirror. I was in a bar. I don't drink, but I was delivering signs to the bar that I had painted. And there's an interesting looking guy sitting there with a big cowboy hat on and a beard. And we started talking, and he was the art director on Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things. He said, yeah, we're shooting a movie shortly coming up called Death Dream. And I had my portfolio in the car. I showed him my portfolio. 3 days later, I was doing my first movie in Brooksville, Florida, assisting Alan Ormsby on Death Dream. Now, the next film they did was in Canada called Deranged, but Alan directed that, and then I was the key makeup guy on that. And that was around 1972, and then like 6 years went by. I was just doing plays, and then I decided to take advantage of the GI Bill, because you only have 7 years after you get out of the service to take advantage of the GI Bill. So I came back here and auditioned at Carnegie Mellon University, showed him my portfolio, and I went back to Caroline. I was doing a play, and I got a telegram that said, we're pleased to announce that you've been accepted in the acting directing program at Carnegie Mellon University. We're also pleased to announce that you will teach Tuesdays and Thursdays. So I got a full scholarship teaching at Carnegie Mellon University and going to school as an acting directing major. And I heard that Romero was gearing up to do another movie, a vampire movie called Martin.
We were going to make Martin, and all set to go, and Tom came off the elevator one day and literally stepped off the elevator, which was opened right into our front office there, and cut his arm open and fell down. And at first I didn't recognize him. I didn't know what this was about. But he jumped right up and said, "Remember me? I'm Tom Savini."
So I wound up doing the makeup effects on Martin, playing a part and doing the stunts. And then I went back to Carolina and was doing a play, Line in Winter, and got a telegram from George, start thinking of ways to kill people. And it was, he said, we're doing a sequel to Night of the Living Dead. Took a leave of absence from school to do Dawn of the Dead, and haven't been back since.
Tom Savini is one of the best in the field. His job is to scare you out of your wits, and he's been quite successful at it.
In the 70s, when Tom Savini and George Romero began working together, they became heroes of independent cinema. At least a good decade or more before independent cinema became the sort of label that people would toss around. These guys were real mavericks and auteurs.
Tom was really creating the whole on-screen genre right there in Dawn of the Dead.
Tom was there at the beginning of the modern horror movement. I mean, it started with, he worked with George Romero on Martin, and then there was that 1-2 punch of Dawn of the Dead and Friday the 13th, which was sort of the big explosion that started the whole splatter movement. I mean, there have been films like Halloween and Black Christmas before it, but it was really Friday the 13th, which was a sort of a quasi-independent film distributed by a major studio with Tom Savini's incredibly realistic effects. It just started a whole new mini industry for the next 5 years.
On the way up to Friday the 13th, we stopped at Dick Smith's house in Larchmont. He was way out there. Tom and I were going, wow, the ideas, the light bulbs were just going off. And the most important thing was he gave us the blood formula, because in Dawn of the Dead, we just used 3M blood and something from Germany, and it just looked like red paint. It was terrible. And so there it was, the formula for making realistic looking blood. And from then on, we had that. And so, that just changed everything too.
People wanted to go to the movies because Tom's effects and his work propelled him and elevated him into sort of marquee status.
Growing up in the 80s, horror was the genre I loved the most when I was a kid. So I just think, he just found a good way to bring gore and cool effects to movies that I grew up on. It's awesome.
His effects, his makeup effects and everything were just, there was a realism to it that now took the film and elevated it into something that it wasn't if those effects weren't there or if they were done poorly.
And I did feel like an assassin. I would load up my car with my tools and go some strange place and kill people, And the teenagers loved it. Like on Friday the 13th, the teenagers would come up and going, how am I gonna die? They were so excited about how they were gonna die. And the juicier the better, the gorier the better.
I'm sure there's probably very seldomly been that much blood used in one death scene ever again. I mean, I think it was like gallons and gallons of blood that they used on that one scene. Here I am like a kid. I mean, I think about this now and it's like, this is so deranged, but I'm a kid and I'm watching this thing literally saw through this guy's skull, through his cranium, and he's like laying on the floor, and obviously it's not a real person, but I don't even know that, because like last thing I see is like, Ted White walking around with like a machete stuck into his head, and I'm just like, oh my God, this is the most gruesome thing ever, and blood just spurting everywhere, everywhere, everywhere. The one thing that I do remember specifically is that when Joseph Zito, the director, introduced me to him, he introduced him in the context of, we're very lucky to have this guy. It's a really big deal that we've got this guy because he's kind of like a legend because he created the first Jason. And, he's a big deal to the franchise. And your character is loosely based on him. So I was told that actually in the beginning.
When I looked in the mirror and saw the finished product, it was hard to believe. And those of them that saw the film, I believe, would understand exactly why. I mean, the face was so contorted with one eye and the teeth and so forth. It was a wonderful makeup job. I was thoroughly pleased with what it looked like.
His tricks of the trade always fooled me, and that's what I like best. I just couldn't figure it out, and everything he does is very simplistic. It's all magic essentially, and common sense, and I think that's why I always expected things to be more complicated than they were, and that's always what fooled me about Tom Savini stuff. Is I'm like, shouldn't it be a puppet head and this and that? That's just a wedge cut out of a fake machete, and we pulled it out in reverse.
I went to do hair and makeup tests, and it was very standard makeup, and I looked very attractive, and it just felt very glamorous, and I thought, oh, this is great. But then Tom showed up, and the first thing I noticed was Tom was really good looking. The artistry that goes into this, it isn't just about blood and guts and bones and, body parts and things like that. It requires a genuine artistry. He has an impressive body of work because of his artistic talent.
I've always been in love with magic ever since my first job with Dr. Sulkini. Watching Dr. Sulkini do the magic tricks and learning backstage how he did them made me fascinated with it. And that, you want to see a magic trick? See how easy it is? And then, of course, that led to the way I think about makeup effects. As you know, my books are called Grand Illusions because I think of makeup effects as magic tricks. I'm doing the same thing a magician does. I'm fooling you to believe that what you're seeing is really happening, just like a magician does. So illusions and magic, and people have said this about my stuff. Tom is a stage magic person, and he incorporates that into his effects.
I mean, he could pull things out of his butt, at the last minute if we needed to. There was a sequence where we needed to invent a zombie that wasn't in the script because we needed to cover a continuity error. And so, okay, we said we'll have a zombie jump out and grab this guy. Then we had to kill the zombie. So, I said, Tom, how are we going to kill this zombie? Bing! I mean, within 5 minutes, he came back with a screwdriver and a soda straw painted silver, so that the screwdriver collapsed into the soda straw, and it looked like the screwdriver went into the zombie's ear. And it's one of the most effective moments in the movie.
Yeah, I mean, I had a reputation when I was doing effects for getting a lot done with very little money. And I was resourceful. I could use, household stuff. So I had a reputation for getting a lot done. And I think it was because of growing up poor. You had to make the best of what you had. That was it. Make the best of what you had.
Tom was literally the one guy who became a household name. I mean, there were people that you would never imagine that would know who he was, that knew, oh my God, Tom Savini, that's the guy that did Dawn of the Dead. That's the guy that, blew up a head with a shotgun or this or that.
So I was doing one bloody movie after another, and it was always gallons and gallons of, fake blood. But I wanted to do the monsters and the creatures, and I was lucky enough that Creepshow came along where I could do monsters like Fluffy, characters like Nate's corpse.
And it's also interesting to look at Tom's body of work, going from stuff like that, from like Dawn of the Dead, and then you look at Creepshow, and that was really a giant leap for Tom, I think, in terms of the amount of work and the type of work. Fluffy was, I think, the first like real creature that he had to make from scratch, and there's a lot of great stuff in Creepshow. I think that's still, if I had to pick my favorite Tom Savini movie, I would have to say it would be Creepshow.
The thing I really love about Tom, and I think everybody who's ever worked with him loves about Tom, is his boundless enthusiasm. He absolutely loves making movies. He loves doing his special makeup effects. He just loves being there and doing it in whatever capacity.
He did the special effects, and he really was, like nobody else, he was a rock star in that industry. No one since has really achieved that status. No one ever will. I mean, he came onto the scene and he just blew people away. You just were like, whoa, this guy's a madman. And then when you find out who he is, he's such a cool personality that he's just a cool guy, right? He's the full package.
It was, back then everybody was pushing the envelope, to see what we could get away with. Here's a new medium, this video. Well, what can we do with it? Now, here we go. We get a whole new media to work with and a budget. And, so it's kind of like, let's see what we can do. Dee Snider was the same thing. He was another one of the guys that went to horror movies every Saturday, So when you got Savini and everybody like that, then it was one of those things that all worked in pretty perfectly.
I was the king of splatter. That's one of the names they associated with me, because I was doing The Prowler and Maniac, The Burning, two Friday the 13th movies in the 80s, Part 1 and Part 4. And, it was great fun. I mean, I wasn't crazy about having, because what happened was people thought that I loved gore, which is not true. People think I'm this hideous monster maker. People who really know me just think I'm a pussycat.
Thank you. My first guest tonight was here once before with some of the most awful-looking horror film special effects we've ever seen. He is one of the most sought-after creators of such effects in the entire movie industry. His credits include Dawn of the Dead, Creepshow, The Burning, and a whole slew of Friday the 13th movies. Please say hello again to Mr. Tom Savini. Tom, nice to see you again.
I used to videotape shows back when VCRs first came out, and he was on David Letterman's show talking about Creepshow and some of the other stuff he had done. I used to tape it and watch it over, just watching his personality and how funny he was and showing his innovations in makeup. And everybody was just amazed, even showing him how he did it. It was amazing how he figured that out. He would talk about using things like Rice Krispies and textures to give flesh a certain look and feel. It's just like, just very, very inventive.
I never thought about it until you said that, yeah. You don't see Rob Bottin or Rick Baker or Dick Smith on the Letterman show. And, back then I never thought of it. I never thought about other effects guys haven't done that stuff. That's interesting. This is the first time I've even thought of that. That as a makeup effects guy, I was on the Letterman show promoting Day of the Dead, Friday the 13th. This is flabbergasting.
There you go. All right. Okay. All right. Now what about you? I saw you have a tiny little daughter. Would you let her go to see some of these awful, disgusting films that you produce?
No.
Does she see all this stuff laying around the house?
Oh, they're on the dresser. She plays with all the monsters. In fact,
brother.
Growing up, my favorite movies were definitely anything with a darker side. Interview with the Vampire, for one, was one of my favorite movies as a child, which was absolutely abnormal because my dad took me to see it in the theaters, and everybody's just looking around like, what is this guy doing here with this little girl?
The first time I went to his house, his little girl was only 5, 6 years old, little pink dress and pigtails and the whole thing. And she's showing me around the basement. And her favorite thing was the anatomy book, or the book with all the accidents in it, the horrific accidents and the mutations and things like that. She, look at this one here, look at this one here, and I'm looking at her going, this is a movie right here, this little girl in the basement.
Could be better in some ways, actually. I wasn't as scared of a lot of things that a normal child probably would be. No boogeyman, my father was the boogeyman type thing, so.
So I'm at the peak of the splatter decade, which is my decade. I just had my daughter Katerina. I married Nancy. My daughter Leah was on the way. And I'm here in my dad's house taking care of my dad. My dad, it was just humorous to him. And after my first paycheck, my dad was floored because it was more money than he was able to save in the entire 32 years of working in a steel mill, and he became very supportive. He would come down. I would have 6 guys working in my basement on Day of the Dead, sculpting zombies, creating all these appliances, generic appliances for zombies. And he would come down, you could just tell on his face, the big smile on his face, that this was something totally alien to him, but entertaining to him. In fact, he turned his workshop in our basement in the house into a workshop for me. Built the tables, but he was always like that. Growing up, I would look at my dad sitting in the living room chair, and I wanted so bad to go over there and just tell him how much I loved him. I never did. But I remember so many times wanting to do that. I would walk over to the door, look out the window, and say, okay, I'm going to turn around, walk over to my dad, hug him, and tell him how much I loved him. Well, it never occurred like that, but it did occur the day before he died, thank God. Went to visit him in the hospital, and we hugged, and I told him I loved him. I kissed him on the cheek. He had pneumonia, but that caused him to have a heart attack. So I ran into the hospital with Nancy and my wife, and we saw him sitting there And he kind of waited a little bit, you know, and then we went and waited. Half an hour later, the nurse came out, doctor or somebody, and said, he's gone. We couldn't save him. So I sat there with my dad, and they were there, and we were all going to the house. And I said, I'll be there later. And I just sat with my dad for like 3 hours. Just sat with him, staring at him, and recalling all the things that we did. And I was able to study him, having just died, and how he turned gray, and then first yellow, and then gray, and it was lonely, it's just... And I needed to do that because when I left, this thing was no longer my dad. I would just sneak around with a video camera and videotape him from my bedroom in the yard. I have him in the winter, with a big coat on, digging up the garden. As it got warmer, spring would come in, he'd have a sweater on, always smoking his pipe and planting stuff. And then in the summer with no shirt, watering. I mean, the garden was a big deal to him. He grew cantaloupes and cucumbers. This is all in our backyard. So I would videotape him doing that, or through the kitchen window making, ravioli or something. So I have hours and hours of footage of my dad being my dad. So whenever I want my dad, all I gotta do is put in the videotape, there he is.
Night of the Living Dead.
Keep reading. Tom Savini's going to be doing the ill-advised remake of Night of the Living Dead. It's preposterous. It can be. It's a story. It's a movie.
The screenplay is done, or it's in a first draft.
The screenplay is definitely done. It's it's unique. You'll hear it's the same original story with lots of twists and turns, and characters do different things and have different roles.
It was a Saturday. I ran over to the Dutch office, and I happened to catch Tom. And I knew what he looked like, knew who he was. And I've never done this in my entire career. I literally body blocked him and said, man, you gotta read me for this thing. He says, he tried to act like he wasn't even making the movie. He says, what thing? And I said, your movie. He says, you know about the movie? I said, yeah, man, if we work together, you're gonna know a lot of me. He said, well, we're almost done with that. I said, you gotta read me. And I jacked him up, he'll verify this. I grabbed him and said, you gotta read me. And he says, you got 5 minutes to prepare, come on in. What he didn't know was that I knew most of the original dialogue verbatim, and I knew who Ben was. So he let it be known to me and everybody around that this was the guy.
Tom called me up and said, hey, I'm doing Night of the Living Dead, and I'm going to send you a script, and I want you to pick any part you want. So I called Tom up and said, yeah, man, I want to play Harry, the guy in the basement. And Tom said, pick any part, just make sure it's Johnny.
I remember George telling me stories of how he borrowed $100,000 to make Night of the Living Dead, and then Tom remade it, and it's in my opinion, it's the most shocking film out there. So.
Well, Night of the Living Dead wasn't a very good experience for me. For one thing, I wanted to shoot in this glorious cemetery 3 blocks from my house. I spent my childhood in the cemetery, riding my bicycle through here, walking through here, jogging through here. I really wanted to use this, but I mean, I understand the consideration. Would have been a move from Washington, PA to this place. Maybe it would have been expensive. But also, I didn't know when the movie started that 2 weeks into it, I would be in the middle of a divorce, and that really wreaked havoc on my mind. You really need all your concentration when you're directing a movie, and even more so. But I was worried about the divorce, losing my daughter, but I had to be there, and they kept slapping my hand. George wasn't there. If George was there, it would have been a blast, because George and I, we click, we get along, And I really wanted to please George. I wanted to impress him with what I was doing. And the few things I did get to do, the censors cut it out. Every exit wound, every time there was a headshot, they cut the exit wound. So the movie was sterile compared to the bloodbath that you might expect with George Romero and my name on the film. So the movie is really maybe 30 or 40% of what I intended to do. There were so many things that I didn't get to do in that movie. An example would be, when Tom goes to the gas pump, I wanted him to catch on fire, and I wanted his flaming body to go near the gas cap of the truck, and that's what makes the truck blow up. And there would have been a sequence in there where his girlfriend is in the car, but he's on fire, so it's like, oh, honey, but you're on fire. Oh, her boyfriend's coming at her in fire, so I thought that would have been cool, and there were some suspense things that I wanted to do. For example, my ending to the film, when Barbara goes back to the farmhouse, was to have her see something in the upstairs window. And she thinks it's Ben. So when she goes in the house, she doesn't just go into the kitchen, she goes right up to the attic. And thinking Ben's up there, but when she goes up there, we see Harry. And Harry sort of retreats behind this full-length mirror. And now I have a two-shot of Harry and Barbara, Harry for real, Barbara in the mirror. So we stay on the shot as Harry retreats behind the mirror and her reflection raises the gun. With her reflection in the mirror, she fires the shot. The mirror, of course, shatters, and now we see Harry's point of view as he's falling to the floor after being shot. And the last thing he sees when he looks up is Barbara's distorted image in the mirror. And so she says her famous line, here's another one for the fire, and she sees them drag Harry and Ben out to the fire. And they put Harry and Ben in the fire face to face. And the end credits was them burning into nothingness. It's been many years later, I'm getting a lot of great compliments about the film. I went to a midnight showing. I went there at 11 o'clock, did a Q&A beforehand. I wasn't going to watch the movie, but I sat down and watched it, and it was good. It was good. The acting was terrific. So some suspense was there. Performances was good. I think, we turned Barbara into a Sigourney Weaver hero type. People like that. Plus, you get to see a bit of a sequel. At the end of the movie. So, in general, I've been getting great comments about it being one of the better remakes that's out there, and there's so many remakes, so I'm proud of it, I'm happy about it, I'm glad that I did it.
And Tom knew this story. He was a Romero student. He sat at Romero's elbow, so he knew what Romero wanted, and he got it. And plus, the zombies were well cast. He did a great job at that, and the environment, couldn't beat it.
What kept me going was I'd be, in the middle of the night, 4 o'clock in the morning, freezing on the hillside, trying to direct zombies and things. And I thought to myself, a long time ago, around 1968, when George asked me to do the effects on the original Night of the Living Dead, and I couldn't do it because of the Army, and being in Vietnam and all that here I am directing a remake of it. So that kept me going, Plus, it was my first feature, so, I swallowed a lot of crap just to make sure I got my name on a feature film, and it was Night of the Living Dead 90. After, doing movie after movie, I always missed the theater, as an actor. The theater kept calling me. The theater in North Carolina kept calling me, so I went back and did Death Trap there. That was so much fun.
You mean put them on? Yes. I mean put them on. Shoots himself. Those were Houdinis. Oh! Cindy. I'm glad you know that much, yes. His name, Clifford Anderson. See,
And then that led to them hiring me to direct Dracula at around Halloween time. So it became, to me, a magic show. I mean, I made Dracula turn into a bat on stage right in front of the audience. The audience would go, "What? How did you do that?" You know, Dracula walks into a doorway, lifts up his cape, and suddenly there's a bat there that flies away. That was so thrilling. I made him disappear once, just disappear. Like 2 guys grab him and the cape falls to the ground and he's gone. And there's a carpet on the stage. And again, people were like, what? Magic tricks, grand illusions for me, live in front of your face on stage. And later on, I got to do it again here in Pittsburgh. So again, you know, I did it at this little theater over here on the north side. It was City Theater. And in the 18-year history of the theater, my Dracula was the most money they've ever made because it was a magic show. You know, again, I turned Dracula into a bat. I had Renfield come out from under the stage into the audience before he made his appearances, which made the women wearing skirts in the first row scream. It was a dream. I'd love to do it again.
He actually had a shop on Butler Street in Lawrenceville where you can think of, looking back, I know the Dark Half, they did the special effects there from Two Evil Eyes. A lot of that stuff was actually made there. So every day after school, would come pick me up from school right down to Butler Street in the workshop and got to see life casts and severed heads laying everywhere.
I had my studio for about 15 years. I remember there were tables and plaster and slime and foam latex and gelatin everywhere. At one point, there were 15 guys working there on films like Two Evil Eyes, Blood-Sucking Pharaohs in Pittsburgh, The Dark Half, and Mr. Stitch. But it was also a clubhouse. My friends and I would just hang out in between jobs, and we would sculpt things for ourselves and make toys and play pool and just, you know, get together and have fun.
I think working at Savini Land was probably the best job I ever had in my life. It was just the most amazing time. When I look back at it, it was just so much fun.
Tom showed me early on that you can have fun, you know, because Tom's really all about fun and having a good time. And of course, when it's time to work, it's time to work. But he's the first person to instigate any sort of shenanigans. And I always really appreciated that, you know, and I always kept it in my mind. I'm like, you know, it was always fun, you know, to work with Tom.
The last film I did effects on, I think, was Mr. Stitch. Every time I did effects on a film, I always tried to play a part, especially George's films, you know. George cast me as an actor in Knight Riders. Makeup effects to me was to get my foot in the door as an actor. I always wanted to be an actor in these films.
The only marker. Action. And background. One more time. Okay.
I was a big fan of his even before, when I was growing up, reading Fangoria magazine, being a big admirer of him in the makeup world, like Maniac and Dawn of the Dead, but also for his acting, like in Knight Riders and Dawn of the Dead itself. That character was so great, the biker character. So I was already a big Savini fan. And when we went to go cast Dusk Till Dawn, we thought about, since we're doing a genre mashup of styles and genres, why not mix up the casting as well? Get, you know, highbrow actors like Harvey Keitel, but also bring in people like Fred Williamson and, you know, Danny Trejo, and Tom Savini sent in a tape.
Sex Machine. Hey, you, Monkey Man! Anything you gotta say to them, you say to me first. Watch out, girlie. Goddamn fucking vampires. Hey, there's a fire over here! Hey, I'm way ahead of you! Hey, what's your name, girlie? Yeah, me? Sex Machine. Pleased to meet you, Kate. Let's go stake these sucker fuckers.
Quentin and I were just howling. We thought that was such a great, his enthusiasm was a different read than we kind of heard it in our head. He has just that wonderful Tom Savini vocal quality that made it, and he sounded so real. It sounded like just like a really nice guy, just went against his type of this kind of pictured him as a badass biker. Tom Savini is badass, but he's also just very affable and humble, and it sounded almost professorial the way he did the lines. Garlic, holy water. You know, he just sounded so casual about it. We just thought it was a hoot. Quentin and I just looked at each other and said, "What do you think we should cast him, right? Wouldn't he be great? Wouldn't it be great to have Tom Savini?" We thought about how big fans we were of his.
The character you see on the screen ain't far removed from the character in real life. He is one strange dude, but a good brother.
When Dusk Till Dawn came along, you know, Quentin Tarantino was a fan of mine growing up. They called me on a Thursday. They wanted the videotape in their hands by the following Thursday. I didn't get the script till the following Wednesday, the day before I had to ship it. So there was no time to memorize lines. And I looked at the script and I saw Sex Machine, and his lines were a lot more interesting and his name was a lot more interesting. So I took his lines and I wrote them on cue cards and put them around the bedroom and did a motorcycle jacket, you know, I read the lines for Sex Machine. And it looked like I was looking at different people when I was auditioning because I'm just looking at the different cue cards. Anyway, when they got it, it made Quentin and Robert laugh. So they changed the body types and made Fred Williamson Frost. And they made Sex Machine a small guy, and I got to play that. And you know, when you're strapping a cock gun on and shooting vampires with it, that's a pretty memorable thing to happen in films. Clooney was the nicest man I've ever met in my life. I mean, look who I got to hang out with. So it was the most fun you could have in a summer.
Now here are some excerpts. These are scenes that were cut out of the movie, and this is one of my favorite bits. Tom sees a couple of bikers starting to turn into vampires.
Fucking vampires.
Taking pictures of the bodies. He's having a lot of fun. And he's handy with a wooden stake. For pace, I'd cut out this one line, and here it is.
Sex Machine, pleased to meet you, Kate. Now let's stake these bloodsucker fuckers.
Now, that's what the MPAA wanted you to see. The real Tom, the taking care of business Tom Savini, wouldn't do it that way. This is what he actually did. We shot lots of bits with Tom. This was one where I decided, how about if there's one bottle left standing in the bar and you use your whip to just from across the room break it. And take after take, Tom just nailed it.
You know, after my divorce with Nancy, we had joint custody. So it was Leah, my daughter Leah, would spend a week with Nancy and spend a week with me, you know. And she was always reluctant at the end of my week to go to that week because it was just simply more fun, I guess, being at my house. And Nancy had some problems back then. But we went to do Dusk Till Dawn. Leah was 9.5 at that point, and I was able to take her for 8 weeks with me. And the idea would be that when after the 8 weeks during Dusk Till Dawn, she would come home and spend 8 weeks with her mother, which fit in because after Dusk Till Dawn, I got another part in the movie, The Demolitionist, where I had to be in L.A., and of course Leah had to stay with her mother. However, during the shooting, I got a call from the Pittsburgh police. Your daughter was, you know, walking around looking for her mother, blah, 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 blah. So I called my friend of 35 years, my boyhood friend, Pat Logan, who was a policeman in Pittsburgh. Called him and his answering machine was on. So I left him a message about what was going on in precinct number 5 with my daughter. And I called the police station, and Pat was there in his pajamas and took custody away from Nancy and took it onto himself, and Leah went to live with him until I got back from The Demolitionist, and it was assigned to me when I got back. And that's how I got custody of my daughter when she was 9.5, and have had it since then. What that meant was, when I got full custody of Leah, that I'm now, a single parent. I'm her really only parent. And that affected, my choices. I remember, Greg Nicotero approached me before he started K&B Effects. Said, hey, let's go to California and use your name and get jobs in and create an effects company. I had my daughter living with me, when she was in school. So a lot of my choices were based around not leaving home, being there for Leah.
So I definitely remember there were times where he was offered different things that would mean complete relocation, and there was a lot of things he couldn't do because there was me and I was in school, and I was able to miss school for certain things, but to completely uplift me out of Pittsburgh would have been maybe traumatizing as a child, and he made those choices based upon me in mind. He definitely, I feel like, missed out on a lot of different opportunities.
Going from movie job to movie job, you lived from paycheck to paycheck. It was a struggle. So luckily, there were all these horror conventions I could go to. And, appearances, signings, and I was living off that for a long time. But also within those 20 years, I was making, alimony payments and child support payments. So it was a struggle. There are a lot of people who are just go from convention to convention, and that's their living. And that was me.
Tom Savini, one of the greatest guys to ever grace the horror business, one of the nicest guys to meet in a convention. He's got a thumbs up in my book.
I think he's legendary. His special effects, just changed the whole horror movie industry. And then I met him today for the first time, and he's just an awesome guy.
So the difference between conventions back then, when they were my lifeblood, they were how I sustained myself, and now is I go there and enjoy the conventions. I go there and enjoy the fans. I go there and listen to their stories and how I've inspired them. I love the convention mood. You're surrounded by people that are into what you do. They're into the monsters. It's like hanging out with your friends who love horror movies, except there's 5,000 of them, or in some shows, 20,000 of them. So many times, me and my best friend, Rob Lucas, would be setting up at a convention, and we would look at each other, God, I love this.
We started a rubber band fight at a Comic-Con show once, right? The next day, there was like 3,000 people with rubber bands. Tom, you started it.
Doing conventions with Tom, because we get crazy, we have rubber band fights from across the room, launching 4 at a time, okay? But, that's part of the fun of the whole thing. Basically, we're big kids having fun.
The fans, the fans are interesting. They range from little kids to, doctors and lawyers and everybody in between. But the fans either love you or hate you. The biggest mistake you can make in life, not just with fans or anything, is to try to please everybody.
Those same people that are in love with Savini and his work want to attribute him to be this monster, this guy that really lives this, whereas he's a family guy like me, It's funny what they want you to be and then what you really are.
It may be a blessing to be typecast as a villain. I have this face. Most of my parts are villains. And it's a big surprise to people when they see Perks of a Wallflower, for example. I'm a high school teacher. The first thing I say to them when they say, hey, I enjoyed you in Perks of a Wallflower, I say, it must have been a big surprise to see me in that, wasn't it? No guns, no zombies, I'm not killing anybody. But it shows some diversity. So there is a blessing to being typecast because I will keep getting those roles, The curse is maybe I won't be the lead in a love story, anytime soon. When I say I don't do effects anymore, and I don't, fans would ask me why I did that, you know. The truth of it is, I mean, I've stopped, my hands are a big problem. There's so much pain in sculpting, so one of the reasons I got away from doing effects is losing the use of my hands, and nobody knows that until now. And even though I don't do makeup effects, I do collaborate and I consult with effects crews. I just did Red Ink in Australia as a consultant, and I collaborated with my buddy Gino Crognelli on Triple H's King of Kings crown for WrestleMania. I've been approached a few times about starting a makeup school. Jeff in Brescia came at me full force. I said, whoa, signed on the spot at the Baltimore restaurant down the street. And then he bought the building and started the programs. We had 24 students the first time. Now we had 80 students come in last October. We still get an average of 35 or 30 on the off months, which are February and June.
Tom talked me into just coming out looking at the school. And when I first came out here, it was an abandoned building. It had been a convent and it was totally gutted. And I thought, well, this is July and the school's gonna open in October. I don't think it's gonna happen. But he said, no, don't worry, it's gonna happen. And so I gave it a shot, told him I'd give it a year, and it's 11 years later and I'm still here.
The work that is coming out of the students is just phenomenal. The students' attitude is, this is school? Because they're having so much fun doing this all day and making their dreams come true. And I think we're the #1 school for, well, there's a lot of reasons. We have industry professionals as teachers. We're the least expensive school, and our program is the longest school. It's 16 months. And it's a degree program. My intention was to give back to other inspiring artists. Because it was so hard learning how to do stuff growing up, nobody shared secrets, except for Dick Smith. I love how that made people feel, to learn something that's a hidden secret for so many years. And I wanted to make people feel the same way, to see students on Face Off consistently, or making careers out of it. These are the guys that are like you. Could have saw Man of 1,000 Faces when I was 11 years old, and another movie that I saw, and then watch Rodin and not be affected. But I was affected by that movie somehow. It made me passionate about makeup effects. So when I see Kevin Kirkpatrick or Ian or Tate or all these guys that are out making careers out of it, they are the ones that had the same passion. So I identify with them and appreciate what it took to get that,
Excuse me, maybe you can help me. I'm looking for Tom Savini.
You want an extreme makeover? You got it.
Wow. Very nice to meet you.
Thanks.
Pleasure. So listen, I have a 15-year-old who, really, you are his hero. He wants to be you. And I found this in his room. This is a drawing he made. Is there anything we can do?
I think I can help you.
In the makeup world, Tom Savini is a household name.
Who's your favorite makeup artist? Tom Savini. He did that?
Yeah.
Yeah!
I really wish I could thank him for all of his work.
I think you might actually be able to. Hey, come on in. Meet Tom Savini.
How you doing?
Yeah, I'm fine.
We would like you to come to the school and just hang out with the students for a couple of days.
I would love that.
I know you would love it. You might not leave.
To me, my father is the epitome of never growing up. Always has something behind the door ready to scare you, or a new toy that he brings home, and it's the constant excitement that you see when a child gets something that they're really excited about. He's still that same person. He's still just always looking for fun things to do, different things, new things.
A lot of, I think, my creativity comes from being childlike. And it's not an insult if you said, oh, you're acting like a child. Oh, thank you so much. That's my goal. My goal in life is to be the child again. That's where creativity and freshness comes from. I had children in a young age. I was 21 when my son was born. My daughter lives with me, and she's a gem. Her son, James, is my familiar, my sidekick. I don't have much to say about them except that they're what I live for, where all my happiness comes from.
I was 16 when I had James, so I mean, the fact that he didn't have a heart attack and handled it and just was very accepting. I mean, now I couldn't imagine if James wasn't around and the relationship my father and I have. He's taken on the responsibility of being James's father as well, and does everything that I remember I got to do when I was young with James, with the conventions. And I know one of my favorite things growing up around him was we were constantly going to Disney every year. Disney's kind of like our special thing, and James is now in that as well.
Like on the screen, it looks like he's like a big, like hero and stuff. Like he's very different. He's just different on the screen, but at home, he's just a normal person.
This guy, Tom Savini, and loved his work and followed him, and maybe I'll go to his school. So I signed up and I was in the first class. I got to meet Tom there, of course, and we became very close. We actually really clicked and had a lot in common. Now I can call him one of my best friends. I mean, we hang out and do things and travel the world together, and I owe a lot to him.
If I had to choose one word for Tom, it would be fun.
If I had one word to describe what working for Tom is, it's fun. Fun or chaotic, which is kind of fun. I always say, you know, he's my best friend, he's my best friend. It's weird. It's one of those that he's more like a brother. We won't speak for a year, and then we'll pick up and call each other at the same moment on the phone. That kind of stuff always did happen and still happens. It's just the weirdest, you know, connection that you have with some people. I don't know what it is.
Again, over the years, we've done a lot of conventions together. I visit him in Pittsburgh from time to time. I think Tom is actually truly a great guy. I wish he directed more. He's a great actor, and I'm starting to cry now. No, actually, I love Tom.
I love Tom Savini. He's a gentleman. He's a man of his word, which is very important. You can look you in the eye and you know exactly where he is about and where he comes from, and that's a rare quality.
They always say don't meet your heroes because you'll be really disappointed. And with Tom, it's the opposite. You know, you met Tom, and it made sense that you would become friends because you admired them for so long, almost like as if you knew you were gonna work with them someday without possibly knowing. I mean, we're on two different sides of the country.
I pick up Rue Morgan, I pick up all the, you know, the horror magazines and everything like that, and just to see what's coming out and what he's doing, and there's always something about Savini in there. You know, he's doing this, he's doing that.
He's really, he's one of the actors in Hollywood that is really athletic. He's not like just bullshit, you know what I mean? Again, it's like, you know, he's a great actor. I have a lot of respect for all the stuff that he's done, with even the mask stuff, you know, I forget what the prosthetics and all that, you know, makeup, you know, that, but he's a great actor.
I feel that Tom doesn't get enough recognition for what he brought to the industry and the thousands of people that Tom influenced in terms of wanting to be filmmakers, not just special effects makeup guys, but writers, directors, producers to make genre movies.
I just got an agent. Everything I've done in my career has been without an agent and from Pittsburgh. My agents got me some great television gigs. A lot of TV stations like the Epix Network are showing horror movies all month. So for the Epix Network, I'm a London After Midnight Lon Chaney kind of guy with flames coming out of a crystal ball to introduce, as Lon Chaney would in a silent movie with title cards, introduce the horror movies. Most people retire when they're 65, you know. That word doesn't exist in my vocabulary anymore, you know. I don't believe in... Retirement to me means death in so many ways, you know. The death of ambition, you know, so... and I can honestly say that's not true with me. Luckily, I can take long breaks between that. I can do a gig and then just, you know, play. Go on vacation. I take long vacations, you know, between jobs. It's taken me, I don't know, 55 years to appreciate the moment, to live in the moment. You know, if you sat in a chair and just made your mind blank, the thoughts that come at you, and thousands of them do, I said those thoughts are hurts from the past and worries about the future. So you're not really here. You're thinking about two places that you have no control over. and that you could do nothing about. You can't do anything about the past. You can prepare for the future, but you can't do shit about it, okay? So you're in these two places and you're not here. And that's what I was suffering from. I was suffering from not being able to live in the moment. Now I can. Now it's great. It's an easy thing to do. My life has changed quite a bit recently. I got married. I have 2 cats. And I'm probably the happiest I've ever been at this moment. And that's what's important, this moment. I've been blessed with having some interesting people in my life. Not just in my career, but in my personal life. My daughter Leah, she's so bright and she is so right and correct. And how else can I say this? Good. She's such a good person.
God, he's dealt with so much craziness from me, and he's handled it very gracefully. Amazing, amazing. He's my favorite guy in the world. I probably could have, God, so many worse things could happen, and he's just made my life amazing.
She's one of the big, bright lights in my life. And James, her son, I don't know where to begin with how I love this kid. He's also so good and so right on and so smart and such an interesting person. And just recently, my daughter gave birth to another grandson, Carson. So that's one more person that I share my life with. And Jody is the same way. The things that she comes out with, it's like listening to great music. The things that come out of their mouths and their minds that I share and connect with.
I think that people kind of like the idea that there are actual Addams families. I think Savini's family is probably very normal, except for the fact that they scare the hell out of people, you know. And our family's kind of like that too.
I mean, I still love movies. I still love working on movies. I miss the theater. There's so many things out there that are really important to me and I love. But the most important thing is, just today I'm walking through my house. The lights are set up here to do this interview. My wife is in front of the big screen in the living room dancing with this aerobics thing that's happening on television. The cats are sitting there watching her. And I'm like, this is happiness. But the most important thing is the feeling I get from this moment. You know, and the next moment that's going to occur when I go down the house and, you know, grab one of the cats or, you know, kiss Jody, you know. I mean, this is really, you know, happiness. And I'm still living in the house that I grew up in, so I've never lost my sense of home. I have no complaints. I'm really enjoying life.
Did you hear all that? I think that cop was Tom Savini. 100.
He's a solid guy. He's a good father. Now he's a grandfather. And I wish you all the luck in the world.
I owe a lot of my career to Tom.
Either that, I enjoy it all, you know? Tinkerbell just came in. I should turn that off, huh?
Make sure you use that.
I'll tell you what. Let's see how close I can get to your legs.
With me holding it?
Yeah, of course. It'll be cool.
Oh my God!
My mic, me!
Sam fucking White, we're shooting a documentary.
I also don't like Tom very much. And the reason I don't like Tom very much is he treated me like shit the first time I met him. I was living in Charlotte at the time. Nothing cool ever came to fucking Charlotte, ever. And I went up to him, I had the Fangoria magazine that had Night of the Living Dead on the cover. I handed it to him, said, big fan of your work, really like the remake. He takes it from me and goes, oh good, the worst experience of my life, that's great. Hands it right back to me. And I spent the whole rest of the day horribly depressed. My illusions were shattered forever, but then I got to know the guy years later, and he's one of my best friends in the business, and there isn't anything I wouldn't do for him. So what started off bad ended up real good, but I never miss an opportunity to fuck with him if I can.
What the fuck was that called? I directed it.
And I went in, and Tom was in there, and I said, Tom, your girlfriend's outside. She's trying to get in. Should I bring her in? He's like, oh, God, what's she doing here? I just leave her out there. So they must have gotten in a fight or something. Somebody claiming to be his date showed up, and he just left her out there. I thought that was pretty damn funny.
You know, one of my very best friends, Bob Savini, is, what? Oh, Tom Savini. Yeah, Tom Savini, one of my very best friends.
In case that didn't work. Oh, he kicked the camera. Fucking moron.